Well, like I've been saying all week, man, the gloves are off because it's our fantasy football playoffs right now. And I know it always feels like it comes at the worst time, but there's so many injuries right now. And it's even getting to our running backs here that are breaking out. You know, guys like Bucky Irving, guys like Isaac Guerrero. Obviously, Bucky Irving, if you haven't heard, he sat out practice today. You know, so I would say Bucky Irving, like the likelihood that he's able to play this week is probably pretty low, to be honest with you. I don't think that Bucky's going to play this week. And even if he does, you know, I think that there's a good chance that he'll be limited in this game, you know, if it's not like a Rachaad White takeover kind of. Like, I genuinely do think that's a good possibility for Rachaad White, even if he was to play this game, to kind of become second fiddle to a guy that's actually healthy for them. You know, it's definitely very possible. And with Isaac Guerrero in particular, you know, he's playing tomorrow night. And I saw that he had, you know, he didn't practice, you know, the estimator report said he wouldn't have practiced on Monday. But he did end up, I don't think he ended up practicing Tuesday, but he did end up participating in a limited walkthrough today. So he ended up being limited essentially. But, you know, Guerrero tomorrow, again, I kind of feel the same way about him. Where it comes to, you know, is Patrick Taylor going to be the lead back tomorrow? I think it's possible. I think Israel Bandiconda has a chance to even be involved. Like, I think that they're both possibilities for sure. So, yeah, those two guys in particular are tough, I would say, right now. But obviously, guys, I say this every year, and if you're new here, that this is the part of it. You know, this is a part of the process, unfortunately, when you're doing fantasy football, especially this late in the year. Injuries will bite you. That's why you got to play the waivers. You got to make trades. Do what you got to do to get it by, because that's what we're here for tonight. I'm going to be going through questions tonight, so make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel to show your support. Sonny, what's going on? Good to see you in here. Chris Wood, what's going on? Should I start JSN or Jacoby Myers? Yeah, as of right now, JSN to me is a must start. Like, you can't. The good thing with JSN is that I did say this on the wide receiver rankings video, that the only problem I have with JSN right now is that it feels a little glass house like, because of the fact that he's, you know, not getting tons of targets or anything like that, but he's been very efficient. Like, over the last month, he's only had one game where he's had double-digit targets. But, you know, he's caught every single pass except one since that time. Like, it's just working between the two, right? And this week, this is a matchup, I think, in Green Bay. It's versus Green Bay in Seattle. I do think this could be potentially high-scoring matchup. I think JSN's a must-start. You know, whereas with Jacoby Myers, I did say it earlier in the week, I don't really care who the quarterback is in Las Vegas. I think that whoever the quarterback is going to be fine, right? Like, Jacoby Myers is actually a good wide receiver. Like, he's proven that he can be, you know, a really good PPR wide receiver, whoever quarterback he's playing with. So, I do think that JSN's just the higher upside play. I'll go with JSN. Sonny, Juwan Jennings or Mike Evans? Yeah, I think that I feel very, very similar to what Juwan Jennings. Like, Jennings, I do believe, is a must start with Brock Purdy. And I stupidly, kind of cowardly, to be honest with you, moved him out of must start category last week because of the Bears matchup. Honestly, you can't fear a matchup with it. Like, Jennings has tons of upside. Tons of it. And he's the best target by far and the most important target in San Francisco. I love Mike. Mike's obviously a really good play too. But I did give him a bump down this week because of the Bears matchup. I do think that Bears matchup is not good for Mike Evans. Or not the Bears, I'm sorry, the Chargers matchup, not the Bears matchup. I'm not worried about the Bears. I'm worried about the Chargers, though, because the Chargers, the one thing that's been consistent with the Chargers defense is that they're kind of dragging everybody into, like, low-scoring games. So I don't personally think that there's, like, like tons of scoring potential. I'll go with Jennings personally. Michael Merowitz, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Sharb in, 2 wide receivers in a flex. CD, Terry, Evans, Judy, DJ. So with Charbonnet, I did read earlier this week that Kenneth Walker went to get like more testing done. Apparently he's day to day. He didn't practice today. I think that it just kind of like reminds me of like how Breece Hall, this injury is being treated right now in New York, right? Like they said last week that like, Breece Hall, we're not going to shut him down. Like he's going to be back. And then this week, the news reporting is that like, the interim coach there, I think it's Downing, right? He said, he's still struggling with this injury. So it's not like he's been given some clean bill of health a week later, after he's off. So, I just don't. It seems similar to this Kenneth Walker thing for me. He got additional testing, I think, earlier this week, and apparently he didn't practice today. So all I'll tell you is this: if Kenneth doesn't play, you got to put Sharp in your lineup, regardless of who they're playing. They're playing the Packers this week. I don't view that matchup as particularly terrible. You've got to put him in. You've got to put him in. This guy has been dominant without Kenneth Walker. So you've got to put Sharp in if he's the only guy. If he's not the only guy, then unfortunately I think that he's kind of what he's been all year, which is that he's a clear backup, and you can't really trust that. That's kind of how I think about that. 2 wide receivers in a flex. CD, Terry, Evans, Judy, DJ. Terry's got to be in for sure, and Judy's got to be in. Terry for obvious reasons. I keep having to fight people on this one. Like, I just don't get it. Like, Terry McLaurin's a top 5 wide receiver this year, guys. And I get it. It's been a weird year for wide receivers, but, 13.3 fantasy points per game, half PPR. It's pretty good. It works with him and Jaden Daniels. It's kind of like Jackson with the Jigba a little bit, but more so on a longer stretch. That he's been like super efficient with his work. So even though he gets, not more than like 8 targets most of the time, like he's very efficient with it. So he's got to go in. Judy's got to go in just because the guy's on freaking fire right now. And he's obviously the highest priority target, but he's also like more targeted than Terry, for example. And for flex, I think CD's matchup this week is really good versus Carolina. I like Mike and DJ. DJ worries me because of the whole Caleb Williams thing. I don't think this Caleb Williams thing, it's consistent enough for me to trust in the playoffs. I was hoping to kind of feel like that. Honestly, I was kind of hoping like after time passed and like they had some time after Shea Waldron got fired, but they kind of took a step back in that direction last week. And it's like, I just can't trust DJ in the playoffs when you've got options like that you have. So for me personally, DJ just doesn't feel right. And I think I'll personally go with CD because of the fact that, like, unlike Mike, he gets tons of targets. And he, in a matchup that's beatable versus Carolina, there is definitely a possibility that he has a Cincinnati-type ceiling again, which was really good. He had almost 100 yards receiving and a touchdown. So I'll go with CD in the flex, and I will go with Terry and Judy. Appreciate the super chat. That is how you get your question answered right away, to do a super chat. Rock out, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Tua, Knicks, Purdy. It's tough. Yeah. No, it definitely is. Listen, I think that, the thing with Tua this week is I'm not particularly worried about this matchup quite as much as like maybe I should be. Because it's a dome game. You know, dome games are Tua's bread and butter. And it's against a tough defense. I don't like the defense. You know, the defense that he has to play is obviously tough. But at the same time, like I don't worry about it as much because this is an environment that he's usually really good in. You know, it's in Houston and that's a dome, so I don't worry about Tua as much. And just the way that Tua's been playing, like he's been playing not only like mistake-free football, but his upside is like been there. You know what I mean? So like Tua's last month, depending on your format, you know, he's giving you anywhere between basically like 25 to 30 points. It's been pretty good. Thank you, honey. So yeah, I think that that it's been pretty good upside. And again, the environment is really good. Now, I'll tell you this, with Bo Nix in particular, I'm actually considering starting him in my league over Jordan Love. I am personally considering it because he gets Indy off a bye. Like, Indianapolis is a great matchup for Bo Nix, and he'll be coming off a bye week. Like, that's a matchup I like. It's a matchup I like a lot. And, you know, Cleveland, he didn't do particularly well, but he also had 2 picks in that game. I don't really worry about the picks as much against Indianapolis, even though they are kind of turnover happy. I do like Bo's matchup quite a bit. And then Purdy, how did he do last week? He did pretty well last week. Obviously, that Buffalo game was a disgrace, but the Rams on Thursday night, I think, could be a really good spot for him. But personally, for me, I think that the most upside is with Bo this week. I think Bo's great. I think he's a fantastic play. I'll go with Bo Nix. Yeah, I'm going to go with Bo Nix in this group. Appreciate the super chat. All right, we'll go back up to the top. We'll go from top to bottom until we get a super chat. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. We buy homes near you, 512. What's going on? In non-PPR, if Hall doesn't go, who do I flex? Khalil Shakir, Garendo, Braylon Allen, Rashad White, or Jacoby Myers? Need upside since I'm playing against Henry. Yeah, I actually... so tomorrow, the kicker rankings will be first, and then the running back rankings will be second. So I actually, you know, just to give a little bit of a sneak peek, I guess, I'm big on Henry this week. I do think that Henry's in good position. Not to make you feel bad because obviously you're playing against him, but I think you're right. The point in saying that is I think you're right to be considering Henry a really high upside play this week. I think he is that. This is a Henry domination game, I think. So, in a non-PPR format, someone like a Khalil Shakir, for example, isn't going to work. Because that guy is, you know, his fantasy production heavily relies on targets because he's not getting in the end zone very much. And he doesn't have tons of big play upside. So I don't particularly love Khalil Shakir in a non-PPR format. Like last week was one thing, but that was kind of an outlier week for Khalil Shakir. Like if you just kind of look at him collectively, he's had 3 receiving touchdowns this year. Like that's not his game. So I don't particularly love Shakir. Garendo is definitely... Actually, let's get Jacoby Myers out of the way. Myers is the same boat. Myers in the same exact boat as Khalil Shakir, so I don't particularly love Jacoby Myers. So I'd have to say I'm out on Shakir and Myers because I do think that Garendo worries me. Garendo does worry me, but, at the same time, Braylon Allen and Rachaad White are in the same boat this week to where they could easily be sharing the backfield. So, for me personally, I think Garendo is going to struggle the most. Like, I personally do not think that you should be, as much as weird as this sounds because of, like, how well he did last week, like, I don't think you should be itching to play Isaac Garendo. I don't. It's a foot sprain. And he's playing on a short week. Like, if he plays at all. So, I don't see a way. If Kyle Shanahan, and I've been saying this all year, the way he likes to run his running backs into the ground, that's based on the assumption that they're usually healthy enough. I think that even he will look at this tomorrow, if Garendo suits up, as like, okay, if we want to actually have a shot at playoffs, I've got to conserve this guy and give Patrick Taylor some touches. So I think that he's going to struggle the most. Braylon Allen has a great matchup versus the Jacksonville Jaguars, and Rachaad White does not against the Los Angeles Chargers. So for me personally, it's like you said, you're shooting for upside, right? I think that Braylon has the most upside between him and Rachaad White. And I think Garendo, his upside will be muted tomorrow. I really do believe that. So I'm going to go with Braylon personally because, Isaiah Davis obviously gets in the end zone last week. I think that Braylon could very easily get in the end zone for them. Again, it's against Jacksonville. It's a horrific defense. I don't see Rachaad White having as much success unless it's through the passing game. And again, that won't help you very much in a non-PPR format. So I'm going to go Braylon Allen if Hall does not play. Appreciate the super chat. That wasn't a super chat, but appreciate the question. Basement Yellow, what's going on? Bad idea to start Wilson and Adams. I don't think it's a terrible idea because they both have upside. Now, the good thing with Adams in particular, and I pointed this out on the wide receiver rankings, is that Devontae Adams has gotten to a place over the past month where it's not just like a high ceiling with him, it's actually a safe floor. Because if you look at his targets, since he got acquired by the Jets, his lowest target game was 6 targets. Like, he's been a really consistently high floor play. So I like it personally. Yeah, I think that he in particular feels really good. Because he's got the upside of Garrett Wilson at this point with a higher floor. Wilson, if anything, he scares me the most. Now, I will say this. Like, last week, he should have had a touchdown catch. It was a bad throw by Rodgers. But there just isn't as much chemistry. And if Rodgers was as good as he was 5 years ago, I would say, like, confidently you could count on 2 wide receivers in New York. I don't think that you can. Because Rodgers is not, he's well past his prime at this point. I think everybody understands that at this point. So I don't think it's a bad idea. I just think that if it were me personally, I'd probably try to go a different direction. Troy Babs, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Is it crazy to consider benching Jalen Hurts for Rodgers or Stafford? Also pick 3 PPR. Garrett Wilson, Juwan Jennings, Puka, and Kupp. So first off with your Hurts question, listen, I actually, as weird as this may sound, I don't think it's crazy. Like, Jalen Hurts, I've kind of discussed this a little bit. With Jalen Hurts, he hasn't, like, busted or anything like that in fantasy, but really over the past month, really over the past several months, he hasn't played a matchup as tough as Pittsburgh. In fact, the worst matchup he had this year was New Orleans, and he had like a 11 to 14 point game depending on your scoring format. So I don't think he's like the cleanest play. I don't. Now, I guess what can be perceived as the craziest thing about it is that if you bench Jalen Hurts, you're seeding like almost a guaranteed touchdown a week because of the fact that he has the tush push. Now, he hasn't been throwing the ball particularly well. That's why I don't think it's crazy. But for Rodgers, I think it's a little nuts. Like, I get it, the matchup is great. But Aaron Rodgers has been, like, he's had great matchups several times this year to where it's fallen flat on his face. And his ceiling just isn't very high. For me to justify benching Hurts, I've got to play a guy who's got as good of a ceiling or maybe just a little bit lower, but a really high floor. Stafford, you know, over the last like 2 months, definitely has had that ceiling. And his floor basically has kind of been around. Hurts is a little bit lower, but not much. He takes on the 49ers tomorrow. I personally think it's going to be kind of a dogfight. Like, it's easy to look back on last week for Stafford and the Rams and say, like, oh, you want to chase the points? Like, it's going to be how people, like, look at Josh Allen, except like, Josh Allen every week is a must start. Stafford is not that every single week. And I think of this game tomorrow as more of a dogfight than like a shootout. Because the 49ers can't score as many. So I don't think that they will be in a shootout. I think it'll be more of a dogfight. So it's not crazy for you to think about it. I think the way you should think about it, though, is like the only way to justify benching Jalen Hurts is if you're getting a guy who can exceed, like, get that level of upside or provides me a safe of a floor. And in this case, this week, I don't particularly feel that way. So I personally would not bench him if I was you. Pick 3 PPR. Garrett Wilson, Jennings, Puka, and Kupp. Well, I've got to start both Rams for sure. Even though I just said Stafford. Man, I mean, kind of like the idea of the super stack. I may reconsider that because I do think Puka and Kupp are both must starts. Puka and Kupp are both must starts for sure. I would personally play Jennings over Garrett Wilson. Jennings just has a higher floor and I think a higher ceiling at this point. So I'll go Jennings over Garrett Wilson. And I'll tell you this. I'm revisiting that Jalen Hurts discussion, specifically when it comes to Matt Stafford, is, listen, I get the intrigue of wanting to play the super stack with Stafford. I don't personally love playing a super stack because if something goes wrong, then that'll tank your week. It will tank your week. I just think that I'd stick with Jalen Hurts personally and play the 2 Rams receivers and play Jawan Jennings. Appreciate the super chat. Will James Jr., what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Full PPR, 1 flex. Connor, MHJ, D-Hop, Judy, Najee, Sharp, or Braylon Allen. Starters are Lamar, Jetta, A.J. Brown, Mixon, Dave Montgomery, and Laporta. Yeah, here's what I'll say. If Kenneth doesn't go, you've got to put Kenneth in. Or I'm sorry, you've got to put Sharp in. Sharp at this point, if there is no Kenneth Walker, that guy is a must start. He is performing. He's on fire. I mean, the guy, every game this year he has started without Kenneth Walker has been a success. Like, not a single bust in there. So, if Kenneth doesn't play, Charbonnet needs to get his way into your lineup, without question. If he doesn't play, if Kenneth does play, and Sharp is not alone, then that's where I think Jerry Jeudy comes in, because that upside is so high. And again, like, it's just like, it's built well with a good foundation. Like, it's not like Nick Westbrook-Akine, like over the past like 2 months, basically, which is that he gets like 3 catches a game and like one of them is a touchdown every single game. Well, that blew up in everybody's face last week, right? Well, Judy, it's not like that. Judy's been, ever since Jameis came in, 6 targets, 8 targets, 11, 11, 6, 13, and 6. Like, it's backed up. And he's playing actually really well. So with Judy, yeah, I just don't think that you can bench him right now. The only way I would bench him is if I had Charbonnet by himself. And luckily, they both play on Sunday, so you should have a pretty good answer. So that's what I would say. Appreciate the super chat. Ethan Mitzner, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. I have Lutz. Do I pivot to Moody, Sanders, or Reichard? Well, I'll tell you this. I don't want to reveal my kicker rankings for tomorrow, which, by the way, kicker rankings will be out first thing tomorrow morning. Running back rankings will be later in the day. So I don't want to reveal everything about my kicker rankings, but personally, for me, I think that Lutz is the best play of the bunch. Like, I think that Will Lutz will be a good play. Reichard is not far behind. I do think that Will Reichard is just in really good shape moving forward. I mean, he, like, regardless of who the Vikings play, and obviously the matchup versus the Bears is good, but Will Lutz, I do think, he's got a good opportunity against the Colts, because I don't see a realistic way of where the Colts slow down the Broncos offense after a bye week when they've actually been pretty healthy. I just think that a week of rest this late in the season, coming off a bye, taking on Indy at home, Broncos offense is going to look good. So I'd stick with Lutz personally. Appreciate the super chat. All right, back up to the top. Tyler Sperry, what's going on? Hawkinson or Otten? Who hasn't done anything since Evans came back? Well, that's actually not true. Otten was not bad last week. Otten had 70 yards on 3 catches. So it wasn't obviously what he'd been doing, but he did not, it was not a bust. Like, full PPR, that's 10 points. Half PPR, it's 8.5. So he did do something. Do I believe he will continue to be a good play? Not particularly. Now, I remember I had identified a pattern heading into last week with TJ Hawkinson, and it kind of broke, because if you look at like what the pattern had been since he'd come back, 4 targets, 9 targets, 3 targets, 9 targets, 6 targets, and then 5. So like it was every other week, like he would average a good amount of targets to get him good fantasy upside, and then the following week he'd bust. He broke that pattern basically last week. He had 5 targets for 4 catches and 45 yards. However, I do think that this matchup, and realistically the way that Darnold is playing, like, I'd personally rather take that chance. Like, I like his matchup better than Otten's already. And again, with Baker, right now he's not playing his best. Like, he's not playing horrifically, but Darnold is, like, peaking at this time. It's the right time to play a Vikings pass catcher in fantasy, in my opinion, because he's peaking at the right time. So I think personally for me, I'd rather take the shot on Hawkinson. But I do want to make it clear, like, it is important to note, like, Otten actually did fine last week. It just wasn't what we're used to based on that stretch that he had without Mike Evans and without Cade Otton. But I wouldn't rely on it for sure. Yeah, I'm tired today. Tired out today. Alfred J. Hanick, what's going on? Updates on Bucky and KW, please. Yeah, listen, I went through it. I went through it before. Bucky did not practice today. So that's a bad sign for, like, his readiness in this game. And I personally, like, just the fact that he left early after trying to go, like, he's been battling with this injury for months. This is not a new thing. Like, not months, but, like, he's been battling this injury for probably the better part of a month. Like, I've heard about the back injury and the hip injury with him for a while. So, I don't think that this is going to go away at all. Like, especially if the guy keeps playing. So, for me personally, like I said, even earlier, even if he plays, then I don't think that he's going to be a must start. I don't. Like, I think that Rachaad White will probably get volume back just because they have to keep this guy healthy, because they've got a legitimate chance of making in fact, I think they will make the playoffs based on the way the Falcons are being stubborn with Michael Penix and Kirk Cousins. So that's my thoughts on Bucky, and I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't play. It would not surprise me at all. Kenneth, on the other hand, feels a little more complicated. He didn't practice today, deemed day-to-day, so that means they probably didn't get, like, bad imaging back, because I saw, like I said earlier in the week, that Kenneth Walker had been sent for more testing on his calf injury. So that wasn't a good start to the week, but being deemed day-to-day probably indicates that it's nothing significant to worry about. Now, again, I feel very similar to what I do with Bucky, which is that even if Kenneth plays, like, I don't view him as a must-start. I don't view Charbonnet like I would with Rachaad White as favorably if Kenneth plays, but I definitely don't look at Kenneth Walker as a must-start. And the problem with him is it's a Sunday night game. So, yeah, it doesn't look great right now for either one of them. Bisco, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. 2 wide receivers, CD, Moore, and Ladd. Tight ends, Andrews, Ingram, and Ertz. Yeah, I think Ladd's got to go in if he plays. If Ladd plays, the guy is so important. And it's been proven. I mean, it's been proven that he's so important to this offense. He was limited in practice again today, so we don't know if he's going to play or not. Again, the good thing with Ladd this week, and the reason I would say play him, is because he got a week off, first of all, and he's not on a Sunday night game. He's playing at 3, but we'll know more sooner than we did, right, last week. So I think Ladd is a play if he plays. And to me, I think CD's a better play. Like, the problem with DJ is that while his ceiling is a little higher than CD's, he can still tank your week. Like, I still think he can tank your week. Since Green Bay, which is the week that was the first week that they had fired Shane Waldron, he's been getting the target share, but like last week it wasn't getting done. And they're playing Minnesota this week, who obviously is beatable through the air, but man, something doesn't feel right. I got to be honest. Like, even against the Lions, who are really good against, the pass, he had a great game. But against the 49ers, they looked disorganized and lost. I watched that. I actually just got done watching that game today. And what popped out at me was like how lost the Bears looked offensively. Because, again, I had said, the problem with promoting that offensive coordinator was he just got promoted to offensive coordinator. So that means he had like an unprecedented amount of responsibility shift in a month. So, like, it blew up in his face and it blew up in everybody's face. So I just don't trust him. I think he can tank your week, and I don't think CD will against the Panthers. But obviously, if Ladd doesn't play, you got to go with DJ Moore. DJ and the Vikings, they're playing on Monday night, so like you'll be fine. You'll know about Ladd before then. Andrews, Ingram, or Ertz. Right now, I've got to ride with Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews, not only do I have him in a bunch of best ball tournaments that have advanced to the playoffs, and by the way, if you made best ball playoffs on Underdog, congratulations to you as well. I made the playoffs in, I think, like 14% of my leagues. So, congratulations if you made the playoffs as well. Mark Andrews, though, like over over the last month, this guy's gotten his upside back and his floor, realistically, outside of that Steelers game. 7 targets, 3 targets, 5, 7, but he's got in the end zone 3 out of the 4 weeks. And he takes on the Giants this week. Like, just the way that he's playing right now, I think you got to go with it. Appreciate the super chat. Adam Thompson, what's going on, man? Appreciate the very generous super chat. Championship quarterfinals. London, Evans, Flowers, and DJ Moore. Sit 1. TBH, I'm leaning towards sitting Evans. LAC has a good defense, and the hammy issue concerns me. London and Flowers are due. Yeah, man, I got to be honest, like, benching Evans out of that group seems like a tall ask for me. So he did miss a walkthrough today. That is concerning for sure. Same hammy injury he's been dealing with. That's not good. It's definitely not a good sign. And I get it, the matchup stinks. Yeah, honestly, I think I actually didn't see this today. So this is actually news to me, not kind of. It's actually really news to me. I didn't even know it was still an injury. It was still an issue, but no, this changes things. Yeah, Evans, I think I'm leaning towards what you're thinking as well. Now, to do my due diligence, Zay, I think, is due because it's the Giants. I do think it's more of a Henry type of game, but I also do think, like, there's been games this year where the Ravens have blown out opponents, obviously because they can do that, and Zay has done well. Like, they blew out the Cowboys, and that wasn't a great game. They blew out the Bills, and that wasn't a great game. And they blew out the Browns. No. That was not a blowout. They blew out the Broncos. So, yeah, I don't fear Zay quite as much. I do think he's also due. London scares me. Like I said earlier in the week, I think I'll caution you from getting too optimistic about Drake London. I will. And it's not because I was not against Drake London. I just have never really liked him quite as much as the rest of the fantasy community does. I already said I was wrong about him earlier in the year. He's done very well for the majority of the year. But I said it earlier this week. This is no fault of London's, but this is turning into a fantasy football playoffs nightmare. Kirk Cousins has lost it. Like, it's over. I'm not joking. Like, when I say to you that it's over, I'm not talking about for this year. I'm talking about Kirk Cousins is done. The guy has lost it. Like, he's lost arm strength. It's not just that the Achilles injury is, like, rekindling itself. The guy's lost arm strength. He's throwing ducks. And he's not talented to not be able to set his feet and throw. So this whole thing, I'll caution you with getting too excited about London. While acknowledging that, yes, he gets the target share, and he's not injured right now. His quarterback is a sinking ship. So I will caution you with that. I agree with you ultimately that I would sit Evans because I think DJ's got a high ceiling. London's probably got as safe of a floor as Evans does this week. But I'll tell you this, like, if it wasn't going to be Evans, I would bench Drake London. Obviously, it doesn't matter because I will bench Mike Evans, but, you know, personally for me, I just think this London thing scares me, man. I really do mean it when I say it's a nightmare for the fantasy playoffs. Because just, like, look at his past month. The targets have been there. Really the past, like, month and a half. Now, the one game where he went out early, he got 2 targets. Let's take that out of the equation because he didn't even finish half the game. But since week 8, 6 targets, 13, 7, 16, and 10. And this guy has not crossed 15 points. This is not a London problem. This is a Kirk Cousins problem, and I don't think it's getting better. It's actually going to get worse. So I will say that I do have genuine concerns for Drake London moving forward. But I will bench Mike. Appreciate the super chat. Ryan, my fellow Ryan, what is going on? Appreciate the super chat. Got to pick two. Mooney, Neighbors, Reed, and Brian Thomas Jr. I just got done saying I think that this Kirk Cousins thing is a nightmare. It sucks. But I will say this with Mooney is that I pointed this out earlier in the year. Mooney seemed to be Cousins' go-to guy whenever the play breaks down. And lately that's been happening a lot. So while he doesn't get the targets that London's getting, it does kind of work with Mooney. Now, it doesn't work every week. You know, there's weeks like the past 2 weeks. You take out the Minnesota Vikings game last week, 3.5 and 3.7 were his last 2 games before that. But it has worked out more over the past month and a half for Mooney than it has for London. So I'd go with Mooney for one of them because I simply cannot trust Neighbors with Tommy Cutlets again. If you haven't heard, Tommy DeVito, Tommy Cutlets is starting this week for the Giants versus the Ravens. I want nothing to do with them. I want nothing to do with any Giant this week. And Malik Neighbors, that one game with Tommy Cutlets, wasn't it the Tampa Bay game? Yeah, I think it was the Tampa Bay game. Yes, it was. The guy just doesn't have upside. There's no upside with Neighbors. People are going to think I'm crazy. I'm going to go with Jaden Reed. Because I think that Jaden Reed's upside versus the Seahawks on Sunday night will be good. Like, Jaden Reed, there's no question that, like, his usage is not consistent. But the one thing that is consistent is that he's the most consistent wide receiver in Green Bay in fantasy football. Those wide receivers have tons of upside in Green Bay, man. And I said it last week. People were not going to like it when I said I personally am starting Jaden Reed this week in several playoff matchups. And the process of playing Jaden Reed is always the same. The guy is really efficient, and he gets high percentage throws. Last week was an outlier. It sucks. Probably ruined a lot of people's chances to make the playoffs, but you're here. And I'd personally go with Jaden Reed myself. If you want, I'll leave you on this. If you want a safer floor, I think both, I would say more so Malik has a safer floor, but not as much upside. But to me personally, like, you're playing fantasy. I play fantasy for upside. I don't really want to just skate by, with my teeth. And I think ultimately what it comes down to for me too is that with Jaden, like, I don't think that his floor is that much lower realistically than Neighbors with Tommy Cutlets this week versus the Ravens. And Brian Thomas Jr., I think his floor is pretty low with Mac Jones. Obviously, it wasn't as bad last week, but yeah, for me personally, I'd go with Jaden Reed. I'd go Jaden Reed and Mooney. Appreciate the super chat. Izzy, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Full PPR flex. Higgins, Addison, Cup, or Montgomery. You got good problems for sure. Very good problems. Obviously, T. Higgins came back down to earth. But you could look at it as that, right? You could look at it as coming back down to earth, or you could look at it as an outlier week. That's kind of how I look at it. The guy has been really consistently high upside outside of last week. Weirdly enough, against the Cowboys, too, which is a matchup they should have been able to take advantage of with T, but that was the Jamar Chase show for sure. Now, Addison, at the same time, he's really coming through at a very critical time for us. And the thing with Addison is that I will say this. I think I may have ranked him a little too low. He actually rose up my wide receiver rankings this morning because I really looked back and I was thinking to myself, man, like the guy, like his fantasy floor has been a little low since he came back from the bye, but his targets have like really stabilized to a really high number, like 5 targets, 8, 9, 6, 12. Like he's actually getting a really good amount of targets. So I kind of view him similarly to T in that way. Kupp is also in that same category. And then, of course, you've got Monty, who's a very safe floor. Personally, for me, it's really close between T and Addison. This week, I'm personally going to go with T, because I think that there's just less of an ability for the Bengals to run the ball as consistently. Because, you know, the problem with the Bengals is that, like, well, I've been saying this for a while. Chase Brown is a good running back, but he's more so Eckler than he is Derrick Henry. So they stray away from the run more. And even in the game, you know, against the Cowboys, that was a great example. Like, Chase Brown was not, like, ripping them off for 20 carries. That's just not really who he is. So I just think that T will he'll have a bounce back this week personally. So I'll go T personally, but like I said, these are good problems to have, and I could easily see myself going with Addison. They're very close. Appreciate the super chat. We buy homes near you 512. What's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Non-PPR. Forgot to mention that I also have Jaden Reed and Smitty on my bench. Would you still roll with Braylon Allen or Rachaad White over them? Personally, for me, I would probably play Braylon over Jaden. But I would play Jaden Reed over Rachaad White. You know, I'll be honest here, and I mentioned this on the wide receiver rankings and on the what I got right and wrong Monday night. I do have actually legitimate concerns with the Eagles passing game. And it's actually past A.J. Brown too. It's not past him, but like it extends beyond him too with Devonta Smith. Like I saw Devonta Smith make comments after the game as well. Like they're both frustrated with Jalen Hurts. It's like this is actually becoming a rift because it wouldn't be as big of a deal to me if they weren't winning. But they're winning. They're on like a 7-game win streak. And you've got your top 2 receivers complaining. Like, that's crazy. So I can imagine that Jalen's like, screw you guys. Like, we're out here winning games. Like, go to hell. Honestly, I can imagine the frustration. So, Devonta does not feel safe to me. Jaden is obviously not safe, but I actually think Jaden's got the high ceiling I know he has. And you should too. But I would personally play Braylon over Jaden, but I would play Jaden over Rachaad White. That's what I would do personally. Appreciate the super chat. Johnny, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Bo or Stroud? I've got to go with Bo. Dude, it's so crazy. I was, earlier today, I was looking through a Best Ball Mania leaderboard, And if you don't know what that is, Best Ball Mania is on Underdog. It's Underdog's big best ball tournament. The big winner gets $1.5 million. Second place gets $750K. So, like, it's a big deal. It's a big deal. And I was kind of looking at the leaderboard and everything, and I saw a team that had Bo Nix, CJ Stroud, and Baker Mayfield. And it was unbelievable. But I saw in that guy's team, CJ Stroud had scored 0 points for him. Which, if you don't know what that means, best ball essentially takes your best score by position weekly and automatically scores it. So, like, your best possible score is automatically logged on a weekly basis in best ball. You don't have to mess with your lineup. It's just you draft once and it gets scored. CJ Stroud had not scored a single point in that guy's team. And it really blew my mind. And I was like, why? Like, CJ's been disappointing, but he hasn't been, like, horrific. And I thought back, and I kind of looked back, and I was like, dude, it's crazy. Like, he's only had one game, depending on your format, maybe 2 or 3, where he's crossed 20 points. Like, the guy's ceiling is just not high. And actually, like, I've been noticing this too lately. I think it's actually kind of worse. Because with CJ, like, over the past month, I've been watching him, and he looks like he has zero confidence in his offensive line. It's crazy to watch. Like, he looks like scared and just tepid. Like, he looks like he's got, like, you know, it's like if you ever play, like, video games and, like, you have, like, your headphones on, like, sometimes those headphones, if you're playing, like, a Fortnite game or, like, a Call of Duty game, like, you'll hear footsteps. That's what I think, like, CJ Stroud has going on. Because, like, he'll hear things that aren't even there. And he'll just get rid of the ball too quickly, and it'll be incomplete. So it's like, it's just weird, man. It's weird. Yeah, man, I don't know. CJ just, he's going through some serious issues, whereas Bo's red hot. And the worst game he's had over the past month was against Cleveland. He gets a bye, comes back home versus Indy. It's a good one. I like that matchup. So I'll go Bo for sure. Appreciate the super chat. Danilo J. Luna, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Good evening, right back at you. Tua or Stafford? You know, I said this earlier in the stream tonight. I think that the good thing with Tua this week is that, you know, if this were a bad weather game, I'd be more reluctant to play him. Now, Houston's defense is tough, and I do think they will be able to sack him, but I don't think they're going to be able to stop them from scoring points. And he's had no interceptions since week 10. And he's only had 1 interception since he got concussed that one night against Buffalo in week 2. Like, this guy's played really clean football. Really, really clean. So, I just think that personally, Tua, the way he's playing, it's like with high floor and high upside. Whereas with Stafford, again, I think that this is more of a dogfight tomorrow. I think Stafford is in for more of a dogfight versus the 49ers. I don't think this is a high-scoring one more like Buffalo, where even in that game, like, depending on your format, he had 20 to 22, maybe 23 points, which isn't bad. But, like, they put up tons of points, and that's, you know, that's not that many. So I'd personally go with Tua. Appreciate the super chat. MC Studios, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Standard, my quarterback situation sucks. A-Raj and Russell, I have Gibbs and Kamara, need 2 wide receivers and a flex. Have Jennings, Garrett Wilson, Ladd, Thielen, and Dowdle. Thanks, man. So if it's between Rodgers and Russell this week, I'll go with Rodgers because I like his matchup better. Russell's does scare me. And especially without Pickens, the guy Dude, I said this heading into the week. The Steelers are a different team without Pickens. Like, they do not have their only functional wide receiver. Like, those other guys, Van Jefferson and Calvin Austin, they work off of George Pickens. So, he wasn't, like, horrific last week or anything like that, but personally for me, I don't think Russ is a good play against Philly's defense. I'd go Rodgers because the Jacksonville matchup is good. And Rodgers last week, like, again, he's not going to give you, like, an upside week or anything like that. That's not Rodgers anymore. But I just think ultimately he's just got a better matchup that I can trust more. Gibbs and Kamara, you need 2 wide receivers and a flex. Jennings, Wilson, Ladd, Thielen, and Dowdle. Jennings is going in one of the wide receiver spots 100%. He plays on Thursday, so make sure he is in a wide receiver spot, not a flex. I would play Ladd if he plays over Garrett Wilson. And you'll probably, if you don't hear anything by noon on Sunday, then you're going to have to go with Wilson. And Thielen and Dowdle. You know, I love Thielen. I like him a lot against the Dallas Cowboys. I do think that that Ladd. I do think that Ladd actually has a pretty good amount of upside moving forward because he's really resumed his role as that number one. Kind of like it was last year, right? Like the way it was last year without Deontay. You know, this guy, 10 targets, 11 targets. So I think that he's got plenty of upside. And Dowdle, like I've bet against Dowdle several times, and last week I did. And he wasn't great, but I do think that his upside this week against Carolina is really good. I've got to go with Dowdle, I think. Dowdle just makes too much sense. So I'll go Jennings, I'll go Ladd, and I will go with Dowdle as the flex. Appreciate the super chat. Ryan, what's going on, my man? Appreciate the super chat. My sleeper league, full PPR. Nick Westbrook, Mooney, Reed, Aaron Jones in the flex spot. Also, Otten or Laporta. Man, Otten or Laporta is tough. You know, the thing with Laporta is obviously, I mean, welcome to the world of, like, dealing with tight ends, but, you know, Laporta obviously needs to get in the end zone because his target share is not enough. Now, over the last month and a half, he has gotten in the end zone a decent amount of times, but, you know, I think at this point he's kind of got a higher ceiling than on. Now, I will say this. If Evans misses this week, Otten goes right back in y'all's lineups. Because like I said, I got that Mike Evans question a little while back, and I honestly did not know that Mike Evans had a re-injured hamstring. Mike Evans did not practice today. So if he does not play, Otten goes right back in your lineup. But as of now, if we don't hear anything about Mike Evans being out, I'd play Laporta over Otten. Nick Westbrook, Mooney, Reed, Aaron Jones in the flex spot. Yeah, I'd go with Mooney. I'd go with Mooney personally. Aaron Jones, the crazy thing with Aaron Jones is I keep betting it against this guy, and it's not really going well for me. And it's not because I don't like him. I just don't trust his workload on a weekly basis. And Mooney gets the Raiders. You know, and honestly, I do think I'd go with Aaron Jones. First time he played the Bears was too good. It was his only 100-yard rushing game since week 3. I'll go with Aaron Jones. Appreciate the super chat, Ryan. All right, we're going to take a couple more questions, then I'm going to go ahead and sign off for the night. Phi Key, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Start 2, Kyron Hill and Evans PPR. Kyron Hill and Evans PPR. Got to go Kyron for one of them for sure. I've been saying all night, I think it's going to be a dogfight tomorrow. And I think Kyron is probably going to benefit from that. So I go Kyron for one of them for sure. This is just kind of a time I don't feel comfortable benching Kyron either, to be honest with you. I think Kyron, I've got to go ahead and play him. He's got in the end zone last 3 weeks. He had 29 carries last week. It's a good matchup versus the 49ers. I'll go with Kyron for sure. Hill and Evans, I'd go Hill. Yeah, at this point, like I said, with Tyreek, like Tyreek and Evans may be going in opposite directions. Like Evans, this thing is a problem for me. If he really is like dealing with the same hammy, this is an issue for sure. So at this point, like with Tyreek's strong week versus the Jets, I'll go with Tyreek Hill and Kyron. Appreciate the super chat. Peter Guzman, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Starting McBride in flex, but with his new injury. Should I start Patrick Taylor or risk it with McBride? Backup is Isaiah Davis. Thanks. What's going on with McBride? I think I missed this one too. He was limited with a knee. Nah, I'd go with McBride. Yeah, I'd go with McBride. Unless McBride does not, for some reason, unless he does not go. Can't imagine benching McBride. Because the thing is, like, McBride has been so consistently their number one target. It's actually absurd. Like, the guy is getting targeted out the wazoo. And the only reason he has had a massive fantasy day is because he hasn't gotten in the end zone. But Patrick Taylor, to me, feels like too much of a risk when I've got certainty that if McBride plays, he's going to get you points. And at this point, like, with Davis, like, I think he's basically in the same position as Patrick Taylor is. Because honestly, like, Garendo, let's say he doesn't go tomorrow, right? I think I think Patrick Taylor will not be the workhorse. Like, I think he may lead the backfield, but I think Israel Abanikanda is a very interesting name to watch tomorrow night. So I don't view him, at the end of the day, very much differently than I view Isaiah Davis. So I personally still go with McBride, and if he doesn't play, I'd play Isaiah Davis. Appreciate the super chat. All right, we're going to answer 2 more questions, and then I've got to get working on the videos for tomorrow. Issachus, what's going on? My goat is live. I appreciate you being in here tonight. Very much means a lot. Like the video, subscribe to the channel to show your support. Andrew Bowers, what's going on? Who wins? I have Burrow, Jamar, Chase, Puka, Jacobs, Charbonnet, DK, Njoku, Bates, Broncos defense. I also have Walker if he plays. His team is Goff, St. Brown, Garrett Wilson, Henry, Pollard, Kraft, MVS, Reichard, and Jets. I mean, obviously, it's hard to predict like who's going to win this matchup right here. But, I mean, I think the Burrow Chase stack is so lethal. Like, so many best ball teams that have moved on to playoffs, and not just best ball, so many teams that have moved on to playoffs have the Burrow Chase stack. Like, the teams, think about the teams you fear the most. The Burrow Chase stack. If you have the Burrow Chase stack this year, you as long as the Bengals don't take their foot off the gas, you have a really high chance of winning. A really high chance. So it's kind of hard for me to personally bet against that stack when you've got Goff and St. Brown, who I don't even view as a particularly strong stack because, I mean, Amon-Ra St. Brown is just not as consistently important as Jamar. So I'd personally take that. I'd personally take your side with the Burrow and Jamar Chase stack. Appreciate everybody being here tonight. Like the video, subscribe to the channel on your way out. Like I said, tomorrow, kicker rankings first, and then running back rankings second. So stay tuned for tomorrow's videos, and I'll see you guys all tomorrow. And if you happen to put in a super chat while I log off, remember that I think I have a lag behind from what you guys do. So sorry if I miss it. And I will try to log back on and answer it if that happens. Love you guys. See you all in tomorrow's videos. Appreciate it.